introduce my guest. Her name is Sally Cummins. She's the Vice President of Sales at Montrose Environmental Group, which provides comprehensive environmentally focused solutions that combine the consistency of a national presence with deep local expertise and regulatory insight. Sally, welcome to the Goats of Growth.
Thanks for having me, Jay.
And so, just to continue what I was just talking about there, I invited Sally on to have her talk about her own buying process and her experience as she chooses technology and what she experiences from her seat, right? Because as you just heard, she's a vice president of sales. She has a sales team, but she obviously has to enable that sales team with technology and process and all of those things. And I thought that she would be a fantastic person to come on. But Sally, let me just stop there and just get a sense from you about the scope of your responsibilities there as the VP of Sales, a little bit about the company and your team.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I work for Montrose Environmental Group. It's an international full suite environmental services company. So, we provide services such as air emissions testing, monitoring, lab services, leak detection and repair, emergency response, pretty much anything you can think of that falls under the umbrella of environmental services, full suite, full stop. So, we serve both government and industry across many market segments. So, to oil and gas, chemical, manufacturing, agriculture, food, automotive, etc. So we really have a really broad scope, and so we have team members that are also selling these different types of services into various different markets. So we have different levels of expertise. My team focuses on our air emissions testing across pretty much all of those industries in sectors. My team has a national presence. As I mentioned, Montrose is international with a primary focus in North America. So we're primarily B2B, obviously, then, and we are needing to get in front of industry experts who need our services.
And tell me about that, because obviously inherently there are plenty of challenges, right, that you need to overcome to make sure that you get in front of the right people. Tell me about choose an initiative right now that you're working on that you have for your team that you want to execute on, and then talk to me about a little bit about either the technology that you're using. You don't have to be specific in terms of a vendor, but just sort of what it does for you and where technology can come in to enable you, even whether it's faster, better, cheaper, more effectively.
Sure. So, for us, we are always trying to expand. Montrose has grown substantially through acquisition. I don't want to quote an exact number because I'd probably have to look at our website to see if we were on number 71 or 72 in terms of numbers of acquisitions. But
Wow.
we're growing fast, and with that, our stack business, our air emissions testing business, was kind of our base. And so, with that, through the acquisition of other companies that have been around for decades long, we had really an established base of customers. So for us, really, I think one of our key strategies and core areas is to be able to kind of expand based off of that base. And as I mentioned, we have multiple different divisions. So for us, being able to cross sell across those different lines and essentially be able to utilize contacts that we already have internally to then sell other services that our end user and our customer may need. And so,
Mm.
with that, we have perhaps sometimes an easier mechanism of reaching our customers than maybe the SaaS salesperson who's trying to do cold calls to reach out to vendors and I mean potential customers and prospects that they don't have an initial in with. So for us, that's kind of our lowest hanging fruit. Obviously, we want to grow and expand upon that. So we are utilizing tools to go beyond just the traditional type of sales, which include just a wide variety of marketing, utilizing our website, utilizing our customers who are reaching out to us via our website, attending conferences, trade shows, developing podcasts and blogs and other media content, webinars, lunch and learns, etc., so that we can share knowledge and information with our customers so they know that we are, industry experts, and we are able to kind of reach out to them in that way as well. But then also, being able to utilize technology to do an email blast, send out regular newsletters, etc. So really, we try to attack it from all different avenues.
Yeah, I hear that. And so when you talk about cross selling and trying to expand deeper into your existing accounts that you have, existing customers that you have, what does that look like now? In other words, what sort of actually wrote down, I had a gentleman on my podcast, frankly, that does a good job, seemingly, of solving this problem for actually leveraging existing connections and contacts for people that are actually already in your company that know people within your accounts that maybe the salesperson doesn't even know that they know them. You know what I mean? But what sort of technology or how are you doing that now? Like, what does it look like? For instance, I'll give you like you might have Salesforce.com as an example, or some sort of CRM where you have your companies and your contacts, and maybe you have certain tags and all that. But beyond that, what are you? How are you doing it in a way that's efficient so that you can cross sell and share information quickly with either internally or with your customers?
So outside of Salesforce, there's not necessarily a tool that we're really utilizing to kind of increase that efficiency. I mean, Salesforce is a very robust tool in that, we're able to have team members go in and be able to see which customers we're servicing, what those contacts are, who has that initial contact. So when we do need a lead, that's the first place that we can go when we're making a marketing campaign, developing a marketing campaign. Our lead tools are, essentially going to be Salesforce and HubSpot, in terms of being able to kind of get that initial contact list. However, how we're trying to synergize the team more is really getting them together, right? And
Mm.
so, we've utilized different training vendors in the past, and we currently still utilize one that has been kind of core to our success in our sales approach. However, most recently, we are taking advantage of kind of bringing that in house to just ensure that our sales team members are meeting with each other regularly. And so you're having that kind of natural interaction. When we do that training, we're breaking out into breakout sessions, and we're talking about the different projects that are happening and what tools and techniques individuals are using to get in front of their customers, what challenges they're facing, what their products are in terms of what they're selling and what they're servicing, so other team members can have a more in-depth knowledge and understanding of all of our services across the organization.
Mm.
So for us, I think that human aspect is probably one of the most important outside of any particular tool. So.
And okay, so let me see if we can tie that together then, right? You have a vendor or had a sales vendor, right? Training vendor that you engaged to help you um, sell more effectively, bringing that in house, brought that in house to help your team sell more effectively. What about like, would let me just sit in the seat, frankly, of a seller who might be listening to this and say, "Oh, this is a discovery call," right? In other words, like, let me see where my company might be able to help Sally, right? So, what about have you thought of learning management systems or sales enablement tools that will enable you to share information internally or educate educate your team, whether it's the new team members that you have as far as onboarding and coaching and training, perhaps upskilling existing. Talk to me about that. Maybe something you have in place, but maybe something that you think maybe would help you even better.
Sure, yeah. So we actually are looking at some different technologies in terms of being able to better kind of monitor our sales process, right, for the actual sales individual. So, being able to record conversations and have that playback, utilizing artificial intelligence to be able to analyze how a call went. However, we do have different market segments where that tool may not necessarily be as effective as others. If we're selling, our regulatory required services to, an oil major, for example, having that call recorded or sending, again, selling some in-house engineering service or other, services that may be more confidential, proprietary type of information, that type of tool might not work. So
Mhm.
we certainly are trying to be creative in that process in terms of tracking, understanding. At the same time, we need to be flexible in terms of what tools will be most beneficial for which group and which division.
So it sounds like you get, to a certain extent, depending on who the account is, your hands tied behind your back in a way as it pertains to training, let's just say, because as you just said, it would be great if you could have access and record every interaction, every call, so that you, or perhaps maybe a manager or director that's reporting to you, can listen to the calls of the sales people and sort of coach them on those types of things. But in a lot of cases, in some cases, you don't even have that ability, right? Just because of what you said in terms of the regulatory issues or privacy and that type of stuff, right? So that's one challenge.
Sure. Sure. And I won't, and I
Mm,
don't necessarily feel like our hands are tied behind our back in terms of we just
mm,
need different tools to accomplish perhaps even the same goal. And, sometimes
mm.
some traditional approaches, the traditional ride along, and, having that kind of weekly one-on-one and getting that kind of feedback, sitting on calls with team members, that is going to achieve that, but maybe not in the most, uh, efficient, futuristic type of a way that we are moving towards.
Yeah, right. I get that. I get that. Yeah, there's no AI when you're riding along. You are the AI, so to
That's
speak,
right.
right? Yeah. Large language model is you sitting inside and listening. All right, so let's imagine for a second that there that you are at some point embarking down this road, right? Like, okay, we need a tool. Like I talked to Jay on the podcast. He gets me thinking about some things. And I'm like, maybe there's something out there, and maybe even like there's a tool that I is near and dear to me. I think I talked to you about it before, called Allego, Allego.
Yeah.
That not only can it record calls with customers and stuff, but also, let's say, for instance, if I were role playing with somebody internally about maybe I don't know how to pitch a a job to a candidate, let's just say, right, just as an example, or how to run a new client meeting as an example, right, which we'll have tomorrow, and I can record those meetings obviously because they're internally, and then as I'm onboarding and coaching team members, at least they have that, and they can also see, let's say, other people in my organization and how their best practices are, and then I can share that with them, just sort of as an example, right? So let's just imagine that you're going down the road of a tool for onboarding, coaching, and training. Where do you start first? Like where does your mind go when you're like, okay, we need a tool, um, and you can even imagine that maybe Salesforce and HubSpot, God forbid, just go away, right? And you're like, okay, I need a CRM. Like it doesn't matter what the tool is, I guess, but where do you go and start your buying process?
Sure. So I think that's a really great question because you're asking the question of where do I go? And I think a lot of sellers these days aren't asking that question in terms of where is my prospect looking to
Yes.
first even understand where they need to be present, if you're following. So I mean, these days, right now, I mean, we're all getting them. We're all getting the cold calls, and cold calling is dying, right? And I think we have been trained, right? We've been trained by um, companies like Amazon and others, where we get to take in control our shopping experience and our shopping time and our shopping uh, what we want and when we want it and how we want to buy it, where we want to get it, and as opposed to walking in a store and being sold to. However, there are still a lot of sales folks that are trying to hard sell and cold call and want to try to meet and talk with the decision maker instead of really utilizing some tools to see, wait, who's maybe looking for a service I provide, so that they can then
Mm.
maybe track that, find out who actually maybe is even interested in having that discussion, and then have that discussion by reaching out. So
Mm.
good question in terms of where do I look, but at the end of the day, really, it's kind of more about ensuring that when you're talking with somebody, that they're already kind of primed to want to have that conversation. And so for me, it really is kind of the initial Google search, right? And so that kind of circles back to, are you as a salesperson utilizing tools that kind of help you take advantage of people who are searching for a product like yours, and therefore you're not necessarily making that cold call, but you're actually reaching out to somebody who already seems to have an interest. Kind of back to the getting messages. I think in the last 3 months, I've certainly seen a ramp up in the number of calls that I get a day. So I'm getting multiple calls a day, to the point now that I'm screening my calls, right? And so I'm not necessarily taking the cold call. However, the majority of these folks aren't even leaving a voicemail. So there's one mistake, right? Leave a voicemail, pitch on the voicemail. Maybe it's a service I do need, but if I'm on a podcast, or if I'm on a conference call, I'm obviously not going to pick up the phone. But yeah, so that's kind of maybe one of the primary areas. Back to your original question, that Google search. But I'm also going to be checking with my team internally, and that's kind of that third point of things, that sales folks are perhaps doing wrong: the cold calling, the hard selling, and then the trying to reach the decision maker. So yeah, they might want to reach out to me on LinkedIn or make a call because they see I have a VP title. And while, yes, I might be able to make a decision as far as, you know, sign the dotted line for a new service, for actually, purchasing it and whatnot. I'm not going to be making that decision in a silo. And my boss actually typically isn't even making that decision in a silo. He's asking us, he's saying, hey, I heard about this tool, or saw this, type of product or service. What do you think about it? How would your team be able to use it? How would you be able to use it? Do you think it's effective? And I'm going to cascade that same message down to my team, and ask them the same question. What do you think about this? Do you see a way to use it? Would it be helpful for you? And frankly, uh, the couple of tools that I've brought into the organization, both were actually brought to me from team members. So,
Mm.
so again, I think that sometimes that thought or question of who am I supposed to contact? Is it the decision maker, the final decision maker? You're really wanting to reach the end user, somebody
Mm.
who is going to be able to listen to your pitch, see your demo, and say that resonates with me because you are solving a pain that I have daily. And sometimes that can be the salesperson that then brings that tool to their manager, who brings it up into the organization and brings it into the organization.
Yeah, I see. There's always there's two sides of it, right? It's top down or bottoms up. And in that case, it's bottoms up because, like you said, it's if you're going to your team or you're going to your peers and saying, hey, how did you solve this problem before? What tools have you used? Right? Like, I mean, frankly, when we brought Bullhorn into my organization, not my company, but a company that I worked for over 15 years ago, it was me and maybe one other person that was going to the president of the company, my boss, and basically saying like, this is we've got to get this right because what we were
Yeah.
using before wasn't cloud based. I couldn't work on it from home, and Bullhorn was, and it was just one of those things that was solving a great challenge for us from an applicant tracking system. So you're right, and like that's like Bullhorn's first contact was with me, who was certainly not a decision maker, but I was, as people will know it as, is it talks about in that book, The Champion, um, that's where you can start to find that influence, which is key.
Right,
You
and you
mentioned.
just mentioned
Mhm.
another key point, and we had a team member that joined the organization that essentially said, I can't join the organization unless you're using this tool. And
There you go.
so they brought that tool in with this very key hire, and so word of mouth. People are important with any sale, and that includes even for us. We're talking about that cross collaboration. Well, I
Mhm.
think it really works in all aspects.
Before I forget, the name of the company that does seemingly, again, I just had the person on my podcast. I'm actually going to check it out myself. It's called Small World. Forget what the dot is, dot AI or whatever, but it's Small World, and they essentially like just unlock and uncover certain relationships that people have within your organization that you wouldn't even know unless you were going through LinkedIn and you were like, "Hey, Sally, I see you're connected to so and so," right? So, just something to think about. But let me just so you talk about Google, we talk about the team. When somebody to taking your advice, right? They find a way of learning about buyer intent, right? Where somebody's intending to make a purchase for something. I guess number one for you is, do you have technology right now that helps you with buyer intent? In other words, to understand who they are and all that stuff, to make your outreach more targeted, if you will. And then also, once they pierce that bubble, so to speak, and they understand, okay, I understand that Sally is intending to buy a learning management tool or some sort of onboarding or whatever. What should the approach be from there? And do you prefer cold email as opposed to cold call?
Sure. So yes, we do utilize different technology to kind of help warm that call up or that lead up. HubSpot is one tool that we utilize that I think is common across a lot of different industries and companies. We also are incorporating Sixth Sense, which I'm actually just learning more about. But that is one of the tools that one of our team members who came into the organization really stands behind, as well as outreach. So these are tools that again allow us to kind of have a better view and understanding in terms of what folks are looking for, who if they're looking for essentially our products and services. We also have another tool which is kind of more of a tool to find just contact information in general. It's called Zoom Info, but it also does have a tool to allow us just to see who has been using our websites, what sites exactly, what web pages exactly. And so if they've landed on that page 5 times, clearly there's some interest there, and maybe they need a call or an email or whatever have you. So
Mm-hmm.
as far as the approach, I think you really do sometimes have to approach it multiple ways. As I kind of mentioned with the cold calling, there was a Harvard Business Review study that was done in partnership with Gartner that showed essentially that 90% of decision makers do not take cold calls anymore. And so I'm probably in that 90%, 90% of the time. So
Right.
there's always that small chance where you just happen to get somebody in the right day and the right time, and and you have that opportunity to kind of pitch and sell, and it's something that they need. At the same time, that's a lot of effort on your part. But the other factors that kind of take place in that is, what service are you selling? What is the cost? If it's a $30 per day, subscription fee, maybe you cold call all you want because you land somebody who needs it. They might be just quick to sign up. However, if you're selling a service that costs $500 per license, and you've got this heavy installation fee, you might want to do some due diligence, understand what the fiscal cycle is of who you're contacting, and maybe reach out to them during budget season because
You're right.
you give them a cold call, and they might like your service, but it's not in the budget yet.
Right.
I do think that multiple avenues, as I mentioned, just again, in trying to reach our customers from a B2B standpoint, we utilized multiple avenues, and some are more effective than others, obviously. But I think you do have to use those multiple channels of making calls as appropriate, sending those emails, but really working at the top of the funnel with your marketing team to ensure that your presence is out there, that you understand when you have individuals who are coming to look for the services that you're providing, and then targeting them in an effective way, and sometimes in a slow approach way, right? How engaged are they? Can you give them some information to feed them to be more engaged? When you give them those little feeds, are they not biting? Maybe they're not ready then to talk with somebody, but if they are, that then okay, maybe now is the time to actually engage and talk with somebody, or obviously have a tool and mechanism for them to also reach out, whether that's just a note within your on your website, or a chat bot in on your website, etc.
So let me ask you this. You mentioned Sixth Sense, you mentioned Outreach, you mentioned Zoom Info, certainly all part of your tech stack. Sixth Sense, I think you alluded to, that's one of the team members that likely brought them into the organization. But were there any of the others, whether it's Outreach or Zoom, and obviously HubSpot and Salesforce are category leaders, but with Outreach and Zoom Info, um, what did the buying process look like there? In other words, how did you ultimately decide on those solutions?
Yeah. So Zoom Info again was one of those situations where it was a team member of mine
Mm.
who essentially brought that tool and solution up. It was a tool that they had used in their previous role with a previous company. They thought it would be very effective. They shared exactly what information it would provide, what it does for them. It actually, they essentially shared the solution it was bringing to a challenge that we were having. And that was being able to identify new non-existing customers. I shared that, we have a great network of being able to collaborate across multiple industries, or multiple divisions within our organization to reach multiple industries. However, if we were really wanting to get out and speak with customers that we do not have a presence with, we didn't really have a good mechanism of reaching the right person. And especially, this was at a time where we were just coming off of the pandemic. So this was the end of 2020. I guess not really off of the pandemic, but we were right there, smack dab in the middle of it. And so we had a lot of people that were working from home, right? Our customers working from home. And so, long gone were the days of calling the central corporate line and asking to speak to so and so in the organization. You needed to have cell phone numbers, right? And that was essentially how that tool got brought up. Now, how did that buying process look? Do we then now take Zoom Info and then go and research every competitor to see which one was better? Not really. We then kind of pitched that internally, spoke with my manager, spoke with other team members, and we evaluated the costs, determined whether or not that was going to fit within our budget. It was the right timing because it was in a period where we would be able to kind of roll it in, and we did so, and we've been using it ever since. However, obviously there's always going to be different tools that come up, and then now there's the comparison, right? In terms of, is this tool still working for us? How, what about this one? How do they compare? And also others bringing in those different options that we'll tend to evaluate from time to time.
And there are certainly Zoom Info competitors. I actually use one. Frankly, that person was on my podcast as well. There's a theme here, Sally. A lot of vendors that I use apparently are on my podcast. And actually, I just after that episode, I there's very few things that I will go and say act on so quickly after actually talking to somebody for the first time and learning about it. This person was the founder, CEO, grew a great company from zero to over 100 million faster than Salesforce, which I thought was really, really cool. But just the product was just so, seemed so amazing. And I went to go check it out. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Ended up getting it. But the reason I bring that up is because to your point, right? You have Zoom Info, you have Sixth Sense, you have Outreach, and obviously each one of those has competitors, and their competitors have technology that can tell which ones you are using, obviously, right? Built with or whatever it is that they're using to figure out what you actually have, right? And now, if they're strategic, they're reaching out through email, through LinkedIn, and they're positioning theirs against the others. As you start to evaluate, and I guess even now, right? Like there are obviously not everything, not every solution is perfect, right? And so naturally you start thinking, okay, this thing needs to be more efficient. We need to do better here. When you start to either become aware of other solutions, or either based on your own research or them coming to you, how do you start to evaluate it when it is a comparison where it might be a replacement of something else?
Sure. The demo is extremely important, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have had vendors reach out and ask to sit in a demo in the past, and I spend 30 minutes and am more confused at the end than when I entered. Right? We have to be able to really functionally see, if we're not literally test driving it ourselves, which is also a way. To be able to see, is this going to be better for me? Is this going to be more effective? Which is, the easiest to use and useful in terms of solving the problem that we have. If it's not a just major hitter in terms of the actual demo, then give us a chance to use a tool for a week or so, or however long, to be able to see all of the benefits from the actual tool.
What are the where do people mess up the demo? Because you talked about being confused, right? And the reality is that you might have one person demoing a product and frankly just doing a poor job, and by the end of it they have caused confusion. You might have somebody else that is demoing the same product and you completely understand what's you know the benefits of it, so to speak, and why it might be for you. So can you help me understand, give me an example, or give me an example of where you were confused, or what makes you confused in a demo?
Sure. So the particular example that I was thinking of, and I won't name names, but
Yeah.
if someone's jumping around from screen to screen, you're maybe not necessarily following. If they're kind of taking you down a path for a feature that may not be applicable to why you are even interested in the product, then you end up getting perhaps again lost because you're shuffling back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, those are kind of the main two things. Stay focused on showcasing the features and benefits that are going to address the issue that the individual is, looking to address, and try to be consistent in terms of, how you move through that demo so that it is more seamless and it is actually kind of representing how the user would possibly navigate that tool in real life.
And all that, that's helpful. And I think all that should come out in the discovery call right before the demo,
Yeah.
where they're learning more about you, your business, and all those things. Give me a few questions that, well, frankly, let's say someone's listening to this episode, right? And they're like, Sally sounds like she's a good prospect for me or my company. What are some questions that they should be asking you candidly, um, to help you or help them help you and find the right solution?
Sure. That's when you have to know your product and you got to know your service and know what problem it solves and what potential problems I may have, because it's going to be different for each individual.
Mhm.
And so you essentially need to kind of hit a chord with me in terms of, are you having some challenges with being able to bring your teams together, and for each of them to kind of know which companies they're working with in the context they're working for. And as I discussed earlier, that's something that we're focusing on. And I'm going to say, well, yes, I do. Why are you asking? Tell me more. Do you have a solution for that?
Right, right.
Then you can go in and explain how that potential tool that you have solves that problem. And it's not a, ours is better than the next, or this is how fabulous ours is. It's just, this is why this tool can help you or someone within your organization.
Yep, that makes sense. That makes sense. Let's say you have two tools, and the let's say one tool is, call it, 25% more than the other, but the implementation and onboarding as it's represented will be um, more efficient, less painful, faster. Are those? I'm looking at you with that. Your look tells me everything I guess I need to know. In other words,
We're going to pay a
you,
little. We're going to pay a little
you
bit more for
yeah,
that. I mean, particularly when it comes to technology, half the battle is getting people to use it. So if
you're right.
if your team members aren't going to incorporate it and use it because it's a challenge to get implemented, it's a challenge to use, then now you've got a useless tool that you're paying for. So
Hmm.
absolutely, there's certainly, I think, a premium when it comes to installation and implementation.
Yeah, for sure. I've been there too often, frankly, where I've paid for a tool that ended
Yeah.
up being either hard to use, and then when you finally figured out how to use it, you use it, and it doesn't do what you thought it could do, and yeah, it's certainly really really painful. Okay, fantastic. And then once they go past the demo, and let's say for instance there was a successful demo, and what should happen next specifically with you in order for them to get a deal done?
I mean, at that point, if it hasn't already been discussed, there needs to be information shared in terms of the pricing and the terms and conditions. And that's where all of the information now has been exchanged in terms of understanding what the tool is, understanding the availability of it, the pricing, the integration. And then it's an internal process at that point, right? And hopefully a win and a purchase order.
And when you say internal process, because you alluded to it a little bit earlier, where it's really a committee of decision makers, right? There's you, probably other people, obviously on your team, your boss, like all that. Is it? Do you often invite, let's say, the account executive in this case, to help you sell it internally to those in those meetings, if necessary? What is it? What, what do you prefer? What does it look like?
So yes, for example, if something seems interesting to me, I will certainly have a couple of people and team members that would join me on the call to be able to see the demo. Or if it's something that I've seen, I will then send off an email to others within the organization that I feel could you utilize it, and say, is there interest here? Or, would you like to join me on, the second phase of this discovery call? But there's not a formula for, in my current role at least. There's not necessarily a process in place in terms of how it becomes a final decision. But certainly we have a certain D of A and delegation of authority and whatnot in terms of pricing and approvals. However, it as I mentioned, it's not going to be typically a decision that's made in a silo. It's going to be kind of, I won't call it an iterative process, but it's certainly going to be a conversation that can happen. That could be an hour long conversation, a decision made in an hour, a day, a week. It just depends on what the nature of the tool is, the size, the impact, etc.
Yep, got it. Price, all that stuff, right? Yep, for sure. One last question before we get into the rapid fire five, which is, if let's say, for instance, someone is listening to this episode and they wanted to reach out to you because maybe they have a problem or a solution to a problem that you have, right? How should that be conceived? That message?
In terms of the method of reaching out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What should, like, in other words, in your mind now, because I'm like writing it, frankly, as we're talking in my mind, like what I would do, but like like what would you do? What would the
Maybe
subject
you need to
line?
give them advice.
Exactly. I'm gonna package this all. Forget about customer
This is
conversations.
how you get in touch with Sally, based off of my conversation with her.
Exactly. That's exactly it, right? I'm gonna repurpose it. I'm gonna put it into like some sort of a course. Um, but like, what should the subject line say? Generally speaking, what should the opener be in the email? Like, what should they be saying to you? Knowing, because somebody could screw that up too, right? In other words, somebody could say that, oh, I heard you on the Goats of Growth, and all of a sudden say something that like is way off. And you're like, all right, that's cool, but like, what would they
It's
say?
a funny question. My husband had asked me, what if we had met like at a bar and I came up to you and I said some corny, cheesy line? What would you have done? And I'm like, well, I think I probably would have seen that you were the one. And so it really wouldn't have mattered like what you said or how you said it
Sure.
because at the end of the day, you end up getting a feeling in a sense. And so
Intuition, yeah.
yeah, and I'm not saying that we buy based off of intuition,
Yep.
but at the end of the day, it is what you are, what you're selling, and it's not some great tagline that's
Mm.
the real end. It's not this great pitch. Be straightforward, be transparent, be succinct.
Mhm. Right. Yeah.
Be succinct, and again, it's not that cold call or that email blast email. It's about knowing who your buyer is, your buyer persona, and understanding first maybe if there is any interest in what it is that you're selling, and then if there is, just tell them what it is that you're selling. Let me be able to see it maybe in the top title line. I use Gmail, and so I'm going to see maybe the first sentence or two in the email. So let me
Hmm.
see what that is. But gimmicks, tricks, emoticons, yeah, none of that is going to work or deter if again what the core of your service is being displayed and showing me value.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say anybody that's listening, just say, I heard you on the Goats of Growth. Because it'll make me feel validated that that Sally heard, it's not just my wife, frankly, that's listening to this. And then that hopefully will stick out in her inbox, because it's not like, unfortunately, the world is listening to the Goats of Growth, but enough people. And then, like she said, just be straightforward and concise, and maybe you have something for her that you heard today um, that would resonate with her. So that would be my advice. And then Sally can tell me, "Hey, I heard from someone. That's pretty cool." That's right. Awesome. You ready for the easy part, which is now the rapid fire five?
Sure thing.
Fabulous. I don't know. Did you get these questions in an email? By the way, it should have been automated, but I don't know if you did or not.
Yeah, yes, I did. There were 4 or 5 questions.
Yeah. All right.
Mhm.
Fabulous. Yep. Just making sure the automation is working. First question: what motivates you?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that, and it kind of boiled down for me two things. The first thing was just having a sense that I am walking in purpose. And I typically get that sense when I know and feel I'm acting in integrity, authenticity, and just kind of using my God given talents. And the second one is a challenge. And it's actually kind of related to the first one because if I'm using my skill sets to solve a problem, that's a big challenge. I'm going to be motivated and I'm essentially walking in my purpose, right? I'm motivated essentially when I see how I can help. others and how I can bring value to others around me using the gifts and talents that I have.
I love it. I call that my unique ability. Well, strategic coach calls that, but I've adopted it. So
Awesome.
for sure, for sure. Name a big goal you have right now, and when would you like to accomplish it?
Sure. So, we have had some tremendous success within our organization. And when I joined the organization a few years ago, we were really trying to kind of turn the organization around, and the organization and team has. And we've really seen some record breaking revenue growth. And so, for me, really kind of our next step now that we have that growth is to go the step beyond to really focusing on the customer experience and improving that customer experience. So that's kind of my big next step, and it started in baby steps. Just kind of understanding better the voice of our customer, and obviously there's not necessarily a target date because that will be ongoing and ever evolving as we're always trying to attempt to bring the customer experience to the next level.
Absolutely. What's your most preferred way to learn new information?
Reading. I really like reading. I mean, and that can include books, articles, newsletters, blogs, SOPs. Especially, I'm a
Ten-
visual learner, and so for me, information just tends to stick with me better when I read it rather than when I hear it. But no matter what your preferred mode of input, utilizing the information that you get right out the gate after ingesting it for me is also very important.
Yeah, I call myself an impatient learner. Which is why I never really finish books. I start them and then I want to go try with the thing that they are talking about.
Oh, there
Um,
you go.
yeah, it's
I
kind of like
like
a language.
Yeah,
You know,
there you
you know. Yep, you got to use it or lose it. And I'm like, wait, that's a good idea. Hold on, I can't. I can't. I'm wasting time. I'm reading. Why am I wasting time reading this book? They just gave me a great idea. Let me go do it. It's one of those things. Oh
Right.
man. Um, how many hours of sleep do you average per night?
And I really wish I didn't have to answer this question.
Uh oh.
Because and the reason is because it's been a personal goal of mine for just the last year. Really, I actually set this goal like last year, I think, almost to the date here, to
Wow.
get more sleep. And
Yep.
so I don't want to be a bad example, but I'm sad to say on average 6 hours, which isn't terrible, but
Mm,
not where my goal is set. So, I'm a night owl, and I will tend to work evenings. I even support customers overseas, and sometimes we'll have meetings at night.
mm.
But I start my day at 5:30, so 6 hours is pretty standard.
What's your goal? How many did you want to get?
Well, I mean, ideally for a healthy lifestyle, you're supposed to get 7 or 8. I just
Yeah.
don't know where those extra 2 hours are.
I know. I have the same challenge, believe me. I am right around like five and
It's
a half or
it's not a
six.
brag. It's not a
I
brag.
know.
I'm gonna
It's
get
not.
there.
I know.
I will brag to you when I'm telling you that I get
Yeah.
8 hours of sleep a night.
Me too. I'll be the same way for sure. Last question of the rapid fire five. What's your favorite thing to do when you aren't working?
So that's spending time with my family, my husband, and I have 2 little girls. So, and that can really look like a lot of things. It can look like dancing in the living room, which was the night before, playing a board game, going to the park, arts and crafts, cooking together, eating together. We like to eat out, and we're all big on travel. So, love to travel to new places. So yeah, that's the spare time.
That's fantastic. What was the last place that you traveled that you enjoyed?
I can honestly say most all places that I've traveled to I've enjoyed,
Yeah.
especially when you're traveling with good company. It's fun.
Yeah.
And so the last place we went to was over Easter holiday, and we went to Cabo, and that was actually my first time going to Cabo. So I tend to like
Wow.
to go to more off the beaten path kind of places, but we had
Yeah.
a really great relaxing time there.
That is awesome. Fantastic. What is okay? So here is a question that I had. Actually, no. Before I get to that, let me ask you a question that you would want me to ask the next guest. That would likely be another revenue leader um, here on the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked a lot about it today, and I think a good question is just how do you see AI potentially transforming your organization and maybe even your personal life?
How do you see AI transforming your organization or your personal life? I love it. Yep, that question has not been asked. And it's a great question, certainly relevant for sure.
Great.
Um, Look at this one. Okay, so here's a question from one of my last guests, who I believe I'm publishing it on in a few days. So his question is, who is your favorite artist?
Ah, okay.
Hmm.
That's I love that broad
Yeah,
category, right?
that's
Because I
right.
mean, I could talk about a musician or
Paint,
a
right,
painter
right.
or, um, and I'm going to go with my daughters.
Ooh, I love it. How old are your daughters, by the way?
They are 4 and 5 years old.
Ah, man, that is fantastic. That is fantastic. Yeah, I
You
encourage.
should see some of my older daughter's stuff. I get shocked sometimes. I'm like,
Is that, oh, it's amazing. You
"That's
know what I do?
That's
You
awesome.
know what I do too. Obviously, if you're watching this on video, I have my kids stuff everywhere because I like to consider myself a creative person, but not visually because I'm horrible at art, but just other things. And it's all over my room, right? It's all over. It's on the ceiling. It's on the wall behind me. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And after a while, I started having them put their ages or like the date that they did it on the back,
Yes.
just so you can track. Okay, this is what you did when you were 4, and this is what you did when you were 6, and that type of stuff. So yeah, it's really really cool. I That is cool, and that's a great answer for sure, for sure. Sally, before we go, how can folks find you, reach out to you, perhaps say thank you, ask you a question I neglected to ask, all that wonderful stuff? It's the best way.
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. Sally Cummins is the tagline. That's probably one of the easiest ways to reach out.
Fantastic. Sally Cummins, don't go anywhere because I want to say goodbye to you and then I'll say goodbye to the audience and I'll say goodbye to you.
All right.
Thank you for going on the Goats of Growth.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Bye, everybody. See you next time.